Illness doesn't kill you. The administration strangles you, paper after paper, until you are nothing more than a budget line. If you are still here, don't just watch. Subscribe. You'll want to hear the rest. It was a biting cold morning, December 14th, a London chill that seeps into your bones, even beneath a cashmere coat. I was sitting in Godfrey Beaumont's office, on the 34th floor of Sterling Beaumont headquarters, and the light filtering through the massive bay windows made the edges of his walnut desk look blurred and unreal. Godfrey, however, was not. He was the kind of man who looked cut from polished steel: Savile Row suit, close shave, and a watch I knew to be a Patek Philippe because I had chosen it for him on our 10th anniversary when we were still just Vivian and Godfrey, and not Miss Ashworth and Mr. Beaumont. He was dismissing me, politely, elegantly, the perfectly measured tone he always used when about to seal a deal or destroy a life. My diagnosis had arrived 3 days before. A rare, insidious thing that required a heavy treatment protocol and, in this country without the American safety nets, expensive. The company's health insurance, my only recourse, was managed by a small subsidiary of Sterling Beaumont itself. A convenient arrangement, I was told at the time. A cruel irony, I knew now. "Vivian, my dear," he had begun, and the use of that familiar term, my dear, tore at me more than an insult. "You know how much this news saddens me. Personally." I nodded, my hand smoothing the thin folder that held the doctor's letter. He hadn't read it. He didn't need to. The figures, the protocols, the financial risk, he already saw them. "Professionally, however," he continued, his voice gliding like ice on glass, "the board has reviewed your position. Your performance is outstanding, always, but with a sick leave as extended as you will need to take, and the associated costs." He paused, staring at the London skyline stretching out behind me. The sky was the color of zinc. "The truth, Vivian, is that we cannot keep your file active, not in the current quarter." I felt the blood drain from my face. No melodrama, just the cold of understanding. I was a file. "The board has decided to reclassify your position," he finished, avoiding the word fire as if it were an obscenity, "and consequently, the associated health insurance will be terminated within 48 hours, according to Clause 3C of your contract." 48 hours. 3 days after announcing my illness, they were cutting off my oxygen. The words, "without you, I wouldn't have called the journalist," were still a long way off, but that's when the seed was planted. Not a seed of burning hatred. That's for low-grade thrillers. No, a seed of surgical precision. I stood up, slowly. The doctor's folder almost slipped from my fingers, but I caught it, feeling the smooth texture of the glossy paper. "I understand, Godfrey," I said, and my voice was so low, so calm, that he tilted his head slightly to hear me. That calm was the calm before an earthquake, a fact he had never grasped about me. He had always mistaken my reserve for submission. "I will send you the separation papers. A very generous severance, you can trust me. A full month's salary for every year of service. 10 years. It's more than the company is legally obliged to." "Ah," I said, "the generosity of Sterling Beaumont. It's a tale we both know well." There was a hint of bitterness, a whisper, but he brushed it aside with a wave of his hand, believing he had successfully disarmed me. He was inches away from being comfortable. "Take care of yourself, Vivian. Really." "I will," I replied, turning my back to the cold sun to face him. "I will take very good care of myself." That was our last exchange. I left the building. The city seemed to have fallen silent. The sounds of the street, The horns, everything was muffled. I felt the cold metal of my apartment key, which I had slipped into the lining of my coat. A key that Godfrey, my former lover, my former mentor, my former future, thought I had already returned. The plan was a living thing, evolving with my treatments. Chemotherapy, that cold, bitter filth that washed away the taste of life, left me weak, yes, but also lucid. Physical pain blurs the edges of the mind, but emotional pain, when it's frozen, it sharpens. It turns revenge into an architectural project. I had spent the first few weeks exhausting myself, looking for solutions, clinging to the dead branches of the system. I'd called Charlotte Wyndham, the company lawyer, a woman who had always looked at me with an icy admiration. She had been charming, polite. "Vivian, I'm sorry, but Clause 3C, it's watertight. We are only applying the terms of the contract. It's for the longevity of the group." The longevity of the group? I was a disposable variable in their longevity equation. That's when I realized the difference between me and Godfrey. He acted out of financial interest, out of moral cowardice. I acted out of survival, and survival requires sharper tools than mere legal paperwork. The symbolic object of my story was not a ring nor a letter. It was a password. During the years we had been together, when our lives were intertwined not only in our sheets, but also in the company's confidential files, Godfrey had used a single password for all his personal devices and his travel laptop, the anniversary of his father's death, followed by my mother's initials. A twisted tribute to the only time I had seen his facade crack. I had always been the woman of details, the woman who remembered the scent of his sheets, linen and vetiver, the way he took his coffee, double shot, cold, the pressure of his hand when he was about to lie, firm and too long. One evening, after a particularly difficult session at the hospital, I had slipped the key into the lock of the small pied-à-terre he used for his discreet getaways outside the city. He thought the place was empty. He thought the key was lost at the bottom of my handbag, now discarded. He was having dinner with Isabella Crawford, the new director of public relations, a woman whose eyes were as bright and as empty as 2 new coins. The apartment smelled of newness and absence. I remember the scent of the new leather on the sofas. I found his travel laptop exactly where he always left it, in the top drawer of a black lacquered desk. The password worked on the first try. The screen lit up, illuminating my emaciated face with a cold blue light. I was tired, broken, but a dangerous precision guided me. I didn't look for salacious secrets. Affairs? I didn't care. They weren't going to pay my hospital bills. I looked for the flaw, and I found it in the encrypted address book, a small, discreet line labeled Operations Luxembourg. That's where I found Georgiana Sterling's name. Georgiana Sterling was the niece of one of the co-founders, a woman I had met only once at a Christmas party 5 years ago, a woman with piercingly intelligent eyes who had left the group 2 years ago after a fierce disagreement over investment policy, a disagreement that Godfrey had cleverly veiled as well-deserved holidays. I remembered one detail from that evening. I had overheard Georgiana speaking in a low voice, her champagne glass half empty. "They think the legacy of this company is money. It's not. It's history, reputation, and they are selling it for scraps." I knew she was waiting. She was waiting for the moment when Sterling Beaumont, under Godfrey's overly aggressive leadership, would make a spectacular misstep. I copied a set of documents, emails about tax evasion in the Luxembourg division, a series of audit reports that had strangely been lost just before the shareholders' meeting, and above all, the disguised layoff policy that had just been implemented. Clause 3C, designed to get rid of costly or disabled employees without decent compensation. I compressed them all into an encrypted file. The job was done in 20 minutes. The elegance of the theft was in its simplicity. I had broken nothing, left no digital trace. I was the woman of details. I had deleted the logs on the laptop, put the device back in its drawer, and slipped away. Back in my apartment, my body was trembling with exhaustion, but my mind was in a calm fever. The journalist. The name came to me immediately. Edmund Harrington, a respected investigative journalist whose articles on corporate corruption in the London Review had brought down 2 CEOs last year. He was the kind of man who didn't like gossip. He liked documents. I sent him the file via a secure server with no identifier, no return address, only 3 words in the subject line: Sterling. Clause 3C, look, I had to wait. Wait in the London grayness, wait in the sanitized waiting rooms, wait for the treatment to do its job. I was tired, lucid, and time had become an undifferentiated mass of days and nights. Then, the response. A single line through the same secure server. I think we should talk. In the rain. Our meeting took place in an anonymous cafe around the corner from my street. I wore a wide hat and a dark coat. I didn't want to be recognized, not yet. He looked tired, his eyes dark-rimmed, but his gaze was direct. Miss Ashworth, he had said, placing a steaming cup of tea in front of me. You are very brave, or very desperate. Both, I replied, sliding along the bench, and please, call me Vivian. He opened a small notebook. These documents, the lost audits, the Luxembourg division, it's the equivalent of a whole department's year of work. You haven't missed a thing. I took a sip of tea. It was too hot, bitter. I had 10 years to understand how the company worked. I knew where the cracks were camouflaged. And Clause 3C, he continued, his voice growing darker. Firing an employee who needs health insurance 3 days after a diagnosis. It's disgusting. It's Godfrey, I corrected. It's human nature when dressed in a 20,000-pound suit and a Patek Philippe. We talked for an hour. I laid everything out, my relationship with Godfrey, my position, my treatment. Not with melodrama, but with the coldness of facts. I was a victim turning into a witness. I told him I didn't want money. I wanted the truth about Sterling Beaumont to be so loud that Godfrey and the cowardly board that supported him could never hide behind a contract again. Why now, Vivian? He asked, his pen poised. Why not last year or the year before? I looked at the rain against the window, each drop tracing a line of distress on the glass. Because last year I was in love with him, and the year before I was naive. Now I'm dying. Perspective changes everything. I'm no longer afraid of the fall. He closed his notebook. It's a story that will destroy them. Everything, Vivian. Tax evasion, abuse of power, discrimination. It's the kind of scandal that will drive the stock price down to a level they can't even imagine. I hope so, I murmured, without any satisfaction, just the feeling of a necessary thing. Time continued to pass, relentless. Edmund's articles began to appear, first as whispers in financial blogs, then as headlines in the national press. Each article was like a hammer blow to the facade of the Sterling Beaumont building. I read, without joy, every line. I watched the stock fall, the forced public apologies. I watched Godfrey, at first arrogant in his denial, then visibly strained during a television interview. He was drowning in the luxury he had built. And then the letter. Not a letter, but an invitation. Sterling Beaumont's annual Christmas party, December 23rd. The largest, the most flamboyant, the one celebrating their longevity. I smiled. It was the final scene. On the day of the party, I prepared myself with an almost ritualistic care. I put on a dress I had bought months ago for the occasion, a long black velvet gown that Godfrey adored. I styled my hair, now short and sparse because of the treatment, and put on makeup. I was pale, yes, tired, but the dangerous calm was there, etched on my face like a new identity. I slipped the final symbolic object of the story into my bag. Not a key this time, but an official document. The copy of the email I had sent to Edmund. The email that had started it all. I arrived at the ball. The hotel ballroom was filled with twinkling lights, forced laughter, expensive champagne. I saw Charlotte Wyndham, the lawyer, eyes wide. I saw Isabella Crawford, her face frozen. They had seen me on television, in Edmund's reports. I was the silent victim, bringing down the empire. Godfrey. He was on stage, amidst the warm lights, trying to keep up appearances. He wore his facade of a smile, but it was worn, torn at the seams. He was giving a speech, his champagne glass in hand, his voice amplified by the microphone. And so, despite a turbulent year, despite the storms, Sterling Beaumont remains strong. Not because of me, not because of the board, but because of you. Every employee, every member of this family. I waited for my moment. I walked through the crowd, slowly, as if moving through molasses. Faces turned, whispers subsided. I was a ghostly apparition, elegant, glacial. I stepped onto the stage, right behind him. He turned around, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, just the fear of a man who knows he has lost. Vivian? He whispered my name. I took the microphone from his hand, brushing against him. The contact was cold. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, and my voice was surprisingly clear, dangerously calm. Please, don't leave. I would also like to propose a toast. I faced the crowd. The light was too strong, but I didn't blink. I looked at Godfrey, who was right next to me, frozen in a mask of polite terror. I would like to thank, from the bottom of my heart, Godfrey Beaumont and the board of directors. The faces in the crowd relaxed. They thought I was going to retract, that some kind of settlement had been reached. The arrogance of the rich. Yes, I continued, I thank you, because on December 14th, 3 days after my diagnosis and 48 hours before the termination of my health insurance, you gave me an invaluable gift. The silence was deafening. You could have heard a piece of glitter drop on the carpet. You gave me the freedom to act. I held up the official document I had pulled from my bag, not the email, but another one. Without you, I said, my eyes locked on Godfrey, his avoiding my gaze. Without your elegant decision, I would never have done what I did next. I wouldn't have found the strength. I wouldn't have had the clarity. I raised my glass, but I didn't drink. Without you, I said, and it was the culmination of 10 years of love, service, and betrayal. Without you, I wouldn't have called the journalist. Godfrey took a step back. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. He understood. The blow was not the act itself, but the public confession, the elegant destruction of his reputation in front of his peers. I looked at the crowd and let my gaze linger on Charlotte Wyndham. And I would also like to announce one thing, I said, my voice still low, still calm. The reason I was able to act is that I was named this morning by Georgiana Sterling as the main witness and co-complainant in the federal investigation into Sterling Beaumont's tax evasion. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Godfrey was nothing more than a white, trembling man on a stage. He had cut off my insurance for a matter of millions. I was going to cost him the entire company. I descended from the stage. I left Godfrey to his downfall, to his silence. As I walked out, I passed Isabella Crawford. She looked at me with a horror mixed with a fascination I had never seen before. I walked into the street. It was cold, and the rain had started to fall, fine and steady. I felt the weight of fatigue, the backlash of courage. I thought about the treatment, the fight ahead. Survival was not guaranteed, but honor, yes. My story is not one of healing, nor of financial victory. It is the story of a woman who refused to be reduced to a budget line. It is the story of precision. Godfrey's password was the date of his father's death, followed by my mother's initials. He believed it was a tribute to our intimacy. But the truth is that Death and I have always had a secret understanding. He should have remembered that. He should have remembered who I was before he threw me out into the street. If you made it to the end, then you are exactly the kind of soul who understands the elegance of destruction. Subscribe before the next truth finds you first.